everybody, welcome back to Vinyl Fetish. It's been a minute. We're getting back in the groove. We're getting back in the groove of making these videos, and we are doing our, not a countdown, but a count of 100 albums that matter. 100 albums that should be in your record collection. If you're a vinyl collector, these are the things that you have. We're crossing genres. We're not even a fifth of the way through, so we got a little bit of work to do. Since we left off at the summer, at the tail end of summer, I've been sort of teasing that I really want to talk about an album to me that is a quintessential summer album that captures the magic of summer. And today we're going to be talking about XTC's 1986 classic, Skylarking. This is an original copy bought at Turtles Records in 1986 for $8.66, which seemed like a lot for a brand new vinyl album in 1986. I've gone through multiple copies of this, and I want to talk about this record as not just as a summer album, but as a kind of artistic statement. In the mid-1980s, XTC had this sort of niche of the margins of Brit, new wave, post-punk weirdness, and their albums had all just been chock full of hooks and chock full of quirky little observations about the world, and they weren't really selling very well. They had, some videos that would pop up on MTV late at night, but they weren't really doing very well. And their label, which was Virgin in the UK and Geffen, United States, was a little bit tired of their shenanigans and kind of told them that they needed a hit record. They needed to sound less English. They needed to sound more contemporary. They had been doing some kind of 60s-ish grooves side projects. So the record before Skylarking, the main XTC record was Big Express, which is a brilliant record and didn't sell anything. And then they've been doing these Dukes of Stratosphere records, which were little homages to 60s power pop psychedelia. And so what happened with this record, they said, look, the label said, here's a list of producers that produce records that have a wider audience. Pick one of these producers, and you guys collaborate and make something that's a little bit more commercial. They looked down the list, and the only name they recognized was Todd Rundgren. I mean, of course, Todd Rundgren. They didn't really know that much about Todd Rundgren, which seems strange. But Todd Rundgren had worked with a lot of artists as producer, and of course, with his own band Utopia and his own hit records. I mean, Todd Rundgren is Todd Rundgren. And so they paired up. The main guys, Colin Moulding and Andy Partridge, sent Todd Rundgren a whole bunch of demos that they'd been working on. And Todd Rundgren, with his crazy brain, said, there's a concept album here. There's a concept album here that's about seasons or time or moving through time. And so the result was this album that comes out in 1986, Skylarking. Skylarking, when I try to think of like a word that sums up an album, the word that sums up this album is pastoral. Pastoral. You feel like you're in a field for the whole record. It is more than the Beatles, influenced by the Beach Boys, Pet Sounds, Smiley Smile era. There are all kinds of sound effects that are brought in. There is a flow of the songs, like a season cycle. One of the great reasons to have this on vinyl is the songs, kind of like side 2 of Abbey Road, the songs sort of form a medley. And when you listen to it on streaming, there's a little break between the songs, and you listen to it on a CD, and you don't always get the full flow. When you listen to it on vinyl, it's seamless. The original production was a little bit thin. Apparently there was a wiring problem when they were mastering it that they fixed on later remasters, but I've always thought it sounded really great. The track listing it sort of depends on which version you get this, because a lot of the people who have this album associate with the song Dear God, which is probably XTC's biggest hit. There's a sort of agnostic anthem or anthem to agnosticism that became a big MTV hit, and of course was very controversial in the Bible Belt where I lived. It's not on this version of the album. When the album first came out, Dear God was not included on it. I'm not quite sure why, because according to all the things I've read, it was intended to be on the record, and why this brilliant song was left off. So this version doesn't have it. So it depends on which version that you get. There are newer versions that have been remastered, sounded better, but if you get the original version, it's not on it. Another thing that sort of marks this record is that the most familiar vocalist with XTC is Andy Partridge. He's sort of the main singer-songwriter guy. But Colin Moulding, the bassist, gets 5 songs on here, and he's more sort of melodic. He's less quirky. So you get a really wonderful balance between Andy Partridge and Colin Moulding's songs on this record, which you don't really get on any other XTC record. And one of the reasons this record is as dense as it is Andy Partridge, they were touring as XTC, constantly on the road like any band is, and he started having panic attacks on stage and said, I don't want to tour anymore, I don't want to do it. So kind of like when the Beatles left the road in 1966, XTC leaves the road in 85 essentially, and really starts living in the studio and constructing these lush pieces that are orchestrated. The guitarist adds a lot of the orchestration. Todd Rundgren is all over this record, and there are songs about rain and heartbreak and sunshine and heartbreak and birds singing and heartbeat, and each of the songs, I could go one by one through the tracks, but I encourage you to listen to it because they all sort of fit together and end with this epic song, Sacrificial Bonfire, that is just like the perfect ending. You imagine, it starts with like crickets, the sound of crickets in the grass. There's a song called Grass also that's not about weed, it's about lying in the grass. Songs about umbrellas and rainy days, and then ends with this song about the sacrificial bonfire. And then the whole piece, side 1 and side 2, take you to a place. I love when an album sort of takes you to a place. I love when an album is like, this is what you should listen to at midnight. You should listen to this record in the morning. This one, if you want to feel like you're just sort of in the English countryside, I think more than any Kinks album, this album sort of takes you to those places of being out in the outside. It is both referential, like I said, a lot of sort of mid-60s psychedelia is in here. Brian Wilson's influence is deep on this record, but also, was very contemporary at the time, especially in the subject matter, not just sort of singing about rain. They were also influenced by early Pink Floyd, also the Syd Barrett era Pink Floyd, so lots of sort of songs about daily life. The man who sailed around his soul. It is something that sounds so good on vinyl, and you don't get the flow when you listen to it on other formats that you get on vinyl. So I would include XTC Skylarking as something that will be required in your collection. This is one of the bands that I beg will record again. They sort of stopped about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago. They're all still alive. It would be so wonderful to have a XTC record. They're sort of on the top of lists up there with REM and the Police and all those folks. But we're in summer. If you want a perfect summer record, I'll include the Spotify link so you can get a taste of it in the description section. But XTC Skylarking, I'm getting a lot of glare there. It's like the summer sun right through. I kept the shrink wrap on. This is new. I have an open one, and then I have one I just saved forever. And this one is probably worth some money now because it's the original non-Dear God version. So I'm going to hold on to this in case I ever need some extra vinyl money. There you go. That's that's the latest XTC. Can't say enough about it. The warmth of Colin Moulding's voice on this, though, is just so perfect for a rainy summer day. I love it. Okay, so that's a quick one. We're going to start knocking these out really quickly. Next, we're going to do one with a special guest host. We're going to cover one that I was going to put into this countdown, one of my favorite albums of all time. The Monkees' Headquarters is up next, but we're going to have a special guest presenter in Ms. Cozy Blazak. Cozy Blazak, that's her name. She is the Monkees expert in the house right now, so stick tuned, subscribe, like, all that good stuff. Tell us in the comments what your favorite record is that you think should be in everybody's collection, and maybe it'll end up on our top 100. Right on. Okay, this record, I love this. Every summer, this record matters to me. This album matters to me. This music matters. You matter. So let's talk about it.